Light, the energy of life itself. Since the beginning of time, light has sustained us, fueled our growth, and shaped the world. Even Einstein recognized that everything we are is made of light. But what if we could harness the light within us, not just to live, but to renew, restore, and rejuvenate? Introducing LifeWave X39, the first product in the world that activates stem cells using our body's own light. Backed by clinical research, multiple patents, and over 10 years of stem cell research, a revolutionary wearable light technology that unlocks the power of activating our own stem cells with a single, safe, affordable, non-transdermal patch that puts you back in control of how you look, feel, and perform. Unlike drugs or chemicals, X39 works naturally, awakening your body's ability to heal and thrive. It's time to unlock your full potential, restore your vitality, and embrace a healthier, more vibrant you.
Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you for joining us. Our guest tonight is gubernatorial candidate for governor of Tennessee, Representative Monty Fritts, live and straight from the campaign trail. How's it going, Monty?
It's going great, Dave. It's good to see you tonight. It's great. I appreciate you letting me be on your show again. We just finished a really good event here in Franklin, neighborhood gathering. Lots of people, lots of questions. Liberty and less government is a message that is really catching on.
Well, hey, it's always good to have you, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've got a lot going on, so let's talk about the response that you're getting overall out there on the campaign trail.
Very positive. I think the reason the other two candidates are unwilling to debate is because they know that when we bring the substance of liberty and less government and our objectives into the discussion, they need to pack it up and go home. So I understand why they don't want to debate. I wish they would. But the August 6th will be here before you know it. And so we're spending late nights like this. We're meeting, of course, we're going into session. That's going to put me in afternoon and evening meetings with the voting base. But it's exciting. We're meeting lots and lots of new people, and when folks hear that the Tennessee budget has grown by 59% in 6 years, and there's a rumor that Governor Lee wants to add another $5.5–6 billion onto that this year. If that's the case, he will have overseen a 74% budget growth, if indeed those numbers are correct, of an additional 5.6. When people on the campaign trail hear that, they want a fiscally responsible conservative. They want someone with an MBA. I have an MBA from UT. They want someone who understands economics and financial policy. They want someone who understands the velocity of a dollar through the economy and how that sending too many of our dollars to Nashville and D.C. pollutes the velocity of the dollar and impacts the economy. It's a different impact than inflation, but it is deleterious to the economy either way. And when you explain that to folks, they get it, and I think they're getting on board.
You mean that somebody like Marcia, if I understand correctly, she's got a degree in home economics and she's got a PhD in swamponomics. I mean, you think maybe people want a little more than that?
Well, I think I hear this all over the state, and it's not the people, it's not the individuals, but we have just learned. We send someone to D.C. to change D.C., and D.C. changes them and recycles them back. And we get some pseudo-career politician who thinks that money grows on trees and that the Constitution is a malleable object. They say things like they have to cut deals with people to get something done.
Right.
Well, those are some things we shouldn't be doing, Dave. Those are the somethings that get $40 million sent to the Taliban on a regular basis, and send money to the Ukraine and 100+ other nations around the country. Those are the somethings we've got to stop doing nationally. Why would we ever trust that mentality that has been indoctrinated in D.C. for 7, 8 years or 20 years or whatever? Why would we trust that? I've started asking a question, folks, Dave. Who are you going to trust? You going to trust the combat veteran or the career politician? Are you going to trust the working class, blue collar guy with an MBA, or are you going to trust the person who has had people tell them how to vote for the last 8 years, 10 years, whatever? I think the choice is clear. I think we're going to win in a landslide, Dave.
Wow. I hope so. I definitely hope so. And I think, I think that's one reason that I don't believe either other two candidates really want to debate. And we would love to have them debate. So if somebody's out there on their campaign team, I know that Monty will debate, at a drop of a hat. I think they are afraid of the side-by-side comparison. When platitudes won't cut it, and when you will wilt in the heat, I think they know that. I think they know if they step on a debate stage with you that their campaign is over or at least near its end. And I think that's why they are afraid of it, because the amount of things that you have knowledge about, the breadth and depth of your knowledge of things that are important, is the other two. They really cannot compare, in my opinion.
And again, Dave, thank you. I appreciate the compliment, but I think it's more than that. I think it's the establishment. Yes, there are names on the people for John and Marcia, but it's the establishment. They get into this. We're going to allow the establishment to tell us how to vote, yep, rather than ask the constituents. When you have public servants or politicians that can't point to meaningful legislation that they've done in support of their people, then what are they doing? Are they just going up to vote? I guess it's a great thing to say that I passed a bill that you can't get spam calls, but that's probably not on my top 10 things that are going to bring America down right now, or Tennessee.
Right.
And it's a great thing to say that you got to ask Ketanji Brown a tough question about what a woman is. But is that it? I mean, is that all you got? I don't know. I don't know. I like both the people. And if they're afraid of the word debate, because a lot of people are afraid of that word, because I'm pretty aggressive with what I believe in. But let's just make it let's go answer questions for the public. If they're not comfortable in sitting down on a debate stage, then let's just answer unscripted questions from the public in Sumner County and the public in Roane County and Cumberland County and Stewart County. Let's do that. I think that'd be a great idea. 5 minutes of opening remarks or 10, and then take half a dozen questions from for each person from different folks. I think it'd be illuminating for the public, and I think we ought to do. I think we're obligated to do that. But and I won't spend too much time on this. But I think the thing I think that's most funny is you have these know-it-alls. Know-it-all want to be political operators.
Right.
And some of them are just wanting something out of it. If they think if they've stood up for one of these candidates that they'll get some big job, right?
Right.
And they offer things sometimes that are so nonsensically weak that, well, you don't have the name recognition. You can't be elected. Well, okay. Are you voting for a celebrity or someone to lead the state of Tennessee in a fiscally conservative and a constitutional manner? Well, you can't raise enough money. So there's a limit on how much money. You got to be above this income level to run. I think many of those folks have bought into this. I'm going to become a slave to the system. That they're going to allow the billionaires and the World Economic Forums and the United Nations to just tell them how to think. And these are your only options, and you're not allowed to think of anything else. They're pasting themselves in the pages of that book, 1984, and they're comfortable there. Think for yourself, folks.
Yeah. Don't be a moron for a millionaire.
Yeah, I agree.
Actually look at who's running, look at their qualifications, their experience, and that's what you should be voting on. And of course, you've already alluded to a lot of the people. Well, you can't win because you don't have millions. That really irritates me. That whole thing. That means that just the top 1% would even be considered. And how's that worked out for us? How did that work out with Haslam and Lee? I mean, I think those are two terrible governors. Certainly terrible for conservatives.
I think it's more than that, Dave. I think it's the top 0.25% is what they're looking at. It's not the top one. I think it's probably the top quarter, maybe one half. And it hasn't worked out well because these people are out of touch with the average Tennessean. They think about this. They go to a UT football game. I love UT football. I love Orange. I'm a UT graduate, and I am an honest to God volunteer because I raised my hand and went off into harm's way. It's different than just going to school there, right?
Right.
But they'll go sit in the box seats and have photographs made with Randy Boyd and, a lot of other good people, celebrity people, but they don't know what that person had down on the nosebleed seats in the south end zone at Neyland Stadium. They had to not buy something they needed to afford to get into an Alabama game. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
And what you don't see them interfacing with that person, you see them with the social elite.
Right.
They're out of touch, and they'll go have they'll go have their photograph made with the folks at Vanderbilt. And I hope there's a few people at Vanderbilt will vote for me. But after they had the World Economic
yeah.
bandy, I don't have any big desire to go hobnob with those folks.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what he was. Well, that's just his nature. You're referencing Governor Lee, and I'm not sure who else was there with him, but yeah, that's just his nature. That's WEF is fine and well. I don't understand that.
I think that you'll find the other candidates are making those same kinds of trips to those places too to hobnob with those people, and so I got a chance to open tonight. I met these nice people's house here in Franklin, and all kinds of folks there, lovers of liberty and wanting less government. And, so appreciate the fact that they would come and ask me questions and let me talk a little bit about me and what liberty and less government looks like. And as I stood there, and they have put together hors d'oeuvres and snacks, and, it's a beautiful thing. I was in Hickson a couple nights ago, same kind of thing.
Right.
And that is so much better than $1,000 a plate or a $300 a plate dinner. I got another invite recently, and I don't want to sting anybody's feelings, but average Tennesseans can't pay $300 a plate to go listen to politicians talk.
Yeah.
And if we're setting table prices at $5,000 and $10,000 and $15,000 for a table to have rubber chicken and stale rice, again, average Tennesseans they're out of touch. They're going to sit in a room full of men whose britches are too tight and their ideologies are all wrong. And I know that sounds coarse,
but it's true.
The more you and I are both veterans, right?
Right.
And God has blessed me, and I've talked. God's blessed you, but my goodness gracious, I don't want to pay $300. I wouldn't pay $300 for a ticket to see Leonard Skinner. Sure enough, wouldn't do that to go hear a politician talk.
Absolutely. I'm with you. So tomorrow starts the first session. And by the way, before we go down there, hey, if you are in the chat, because we're going to start taking questions here in a minute. So if you're in the chat, start thinking of questions. If you're on Facebook, because we're also streaming this on Facebook tonight, if you have questions, let us know. Unfortunately, we're not set up to where you can call in, but I'll get it on my text, and I'll ask Monty the questions when we start doing that here in just a few minutes. So if you're elected, and I hope that you will, I think there's a good chance because, like I say, once people hear what you have to say, and when they're able to look at all the qualifications that you have versus the other two, not to mention the history of the other two, I think you have a very good chance. Of course,
well, Dave, Dave, can I
Sure.
cut in there?
Yeah.
I would agree with you. God has blessed me. I've got to do some unique things in life and organizations I've led and things I've gotten to do. But just the voting record, if you just look at the voting record, I think the freedomindex.org is one of the most reliable assessments of the constitutionality of the vote and small government principles that the candidate or the office holder holds. And, I score in the 90s to 100 and they score in the 60s.
Right. But a lot of people think that heritage is the end all be all. And I don't agree with that. And of course, I think one of the candidates has pretty high on heritage, but if you really get to comparing the two different organizations there's, as you said, with the Freedom Index, it's much more constitutionally oriented.
Well, I would even just offer this again. What bills have they passed? Did either of the, and again, I love them both as humans, but this National Firearms Act thing just went through Congress. There was all these huge discussions, and the senators allowed a staff parliamentarian to tell them that they couldn't vote to restore my constitutional rights. And in the House, I didn't hear Congressman Rose raise any stink about it. I think people in Tennessee are tired of politicians who are afraid to speak up. They're hiring us to go do this job to interpose for them and stand up on their behalf. And, I've not been perfect at that. No one's perfect. But I don't even see any effort there, to be honest.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah. Well, you might now. It's an election year.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I doubt it.
Yeah.
I'll just be.
So if you get in, what can people expect out of a Monty Fritts administration?
Transparency, access to the governor's office. I think that we have to have, we've got folks leaving. If your viewers see me waving at folks, I'm sitting in the driveway where we just had the event. I have to tell these folks bye occasionally.
Right.
Transparency and a government that works for them, a government that recognizes that and works under the authority of the Constitution. Reassignment of all these legislative liaisons, many of them good people, good state employees, but we're going to put them on the governor's helpline, whatever we call that.
Right.
And I think when Dave Vance calls the governor's office, he may leave a message, but he better, by golly, get a call back. And if you send an email, you ought to get an answer back. The governor works for the people of Tennessee. I just sat in a room and asked him, how many of y'all called the governor? Several hands went up. I said, how many have gotten a reply? 0. and I'm in a pretty good neighborhood here. This is not right. I'm in a pretty good neighborhood and they didn't get a call back. So I think that's part of it. Standing up for your rights. This things like this silly Hughes v. Lee, the wording, the insulting wording that the Nashville establishment is using. And it's almost as if, well, you people are all stupid. You don't matter. We're going to give you the rights we think you deserve. You hire me, you're going to have a governor that thinks that your rights have been granted you by Almighty God, and I will fight to secure them. And if that means vetoing bad legislation, I will do it. If that means vetoing budgets that have become bloated with pork and corporate welfare, I will do it. And if that means that I have to get on the bully pulpit of every media source I possibly can and call out the folks in the General Assembly for not standing up for your rights, I will do it.
Good. I've got the first question in from the chat. What would Monty do as governor to protect our state from mandatory digital biometric ID and central bank digital currency?
Well, I think that one of the first things that we can do is speak openly about that and recognize it as a threat. Secondly, don't associate with these world global elitist organizations that are pushing for that. The World Economic Forum would love to have a digital ID.
Right.
Because they really want to look at the average Tennessean as just a cattle in the field that they can milk until the udders are dry and then send that cow off to either the glue factory or the steak factory. Right. I mean, that's just the way they look at us. And I think recognizing that our rights are from God is the first part of that. Representative Halsey's tried for several years to get the ability in place to have a mint up in Upper East Tennessee. I think that's part of the solution. I think that leaving more money in the pockets of the average Tennessean, back to the tearing down that high place of taking too much of your money, is important, because every dollar that government takes that you can't save puts you at a greater vulnerability if something bad happens. Now, I will tell you, I do think there's a push worldwide and in many circles within the United States of these elitists that they would love to have a centralized digital currency. They would love to have an implant in our skin so that they have biometrics on everything we do and control us by what we can and can't buy, which means starving us out. Really, I know that that's a threat, and so I think that we've got to be able to keep more money in our pockets, and there has to be a willingness of the governor of the state of Tennessee to look at whomever it is in the federal government and say, you've got this backwards. The states created the federal government. You're not going to send my money to me with these kinds of restrictions on them. We're going to nullify that. I'm just going to start by saying no. And that we're not going to comply with unconstitutional things. A centralized digital currency, I don't see how you could find that is constitutional in the United States of America.
Oh, I don't see how you could either.
And so I think standing up for that Constitution, we must vigorously embrace our liberty in Tennessee. And we'll do that. I've already talked about that. And the second thing we have to do in answer to this person's question is relentlessly defend the Constitution. And I think there's a time that under that whole doctrine of lesser magistrates.
Right.
And I don't want to be arguing with somebody all the time, but I'm not going to allow some fat, out of touch politician in D.C. to pass something that puts a thumb on the neck of Tennesseans and not say something. And I think Tennesseans are missing that. I think they want somebody with a little fire in their gullet. So can I tell a quick joke?
Oh, yeah.
In answer to
Sure, yeah.
You know why politicians don't go to chiropractors?
They don't have a spine.
They don't have a spine to a line. That's exactly right. And I think knowing that you and I both embrace our inner smart aleck, I should have known you would get that. But I think I meet people from the Mississippi River to the Smoky Mountains that are sick of weak males. And they don't want a tough guy. I'm no tough guy. You can ask my grandkids. I'm one of the nicest people in the world. But there are lines that we don't cross. And there are things that we don't do. And the boundaries on that Constitution must be protected and secured. And if that means we have to get a little bit loud about it, I'm okay with doing that.
Good. Here's another question. Given that Senator Blackburn, now this is a question from the chat, it's not from me. Given that Senator Blackburn is pushing a Fraud Accountability Act, why does Monty think she's not pushing a Budget Reduction Act? Is political posturing worth more than physical conservatism?
So there's two questions there.
Right. I guess basically the second question is she just posturing? Why is she not pushing a Budget Reduction Act, and is she just posturing?
Well, I would say that answer is absolutely. She had an opportunity, whether you like Rand Paul or not. He offered two bills in 2025, or two pieces of legislation in 2025. If my sources are correct, I think they are, because one of them's the New American, that would have capped the deficit, right? Because the deficit right now is about $1.8 trillion. And she didn't support that based on what I've seen.
Right.
And the other would have capped the debt, would have put a limit on it, how much further we can go in debt. And she wouldn't vote for that. Why would you not do that? Have you not spoken to the first young person? Because I'm telling you, the college Republicans, the Turning Point, the YAL, the young people, they're like, stop the debt. You're killing us.
Yep.
And I think some of our generation, Dave, if not you and I, maybe we weren't engaged enough soon. I wasn't, right? And so I have to be a little bit repentant about that. But what our generation has done to these 20-somethings is egregious in just the debt, and the 30-somethings and the 40-somethings. But our grandchildren and their children won't have this debt paid off. And so there's no fiscal conservative. Those people, you can count them on your two hands. Those congressmen and senators that are actually fiscal conservatives, and Senator Blackburn ain't one of those.
Well, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of people will agree with that. Still waiting on another question from the chat, but I can come up with some while we're waiting here.
Well,
or you can comment. You can comment.
There was kind of two questions in that, and the first part of the question, is it just posturing? And I kind of answered that part of it. In James, the Bible tells us, James said, show me your faith without works, and I'll show you my faith with works. Right. And so I think there's a little bit of an applicability there, not just in faith, but constitutionality and your willingness to stand up for the citizen. There was not a willingness to stand up for us on the FISA thing until they found out they were being spied on, and then we were going to protect with $500,000 fines.
Right.
And I don't know. I haven't looked. Did Congressman Rose vote for that when it went through the first time as well?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look.
I know he's complaining about it now, and that's good, but very few in Congress stood up for us. I just don't get it. I think that, again, out of touch. They have been to too many $20,000 per table or $500 per seat dinners, and they listen to folks that are making money off of illegals that are being here in their businesses.
Yep. And
they have failed to act. They have sat idly by, and until this young man exposed what was happening up in Little Somalia or Minnesota, we didn't hear an outcry from anybody in Congress about how many billions of dollars we were spending there. And we knew Tampon Tim was an idiot. Why wasn't Congress already looking at that?
Yeah, you would have thought.
Yeah, because I'll get myself in trouble here. But here's why. Some of those people just use one another to raise funds off the other one. They don't really, they're not assigned to it. They're not fixed or assigned themselves to a moral position other than getting reelected and raising money.
That's right. They stand for reelection, and that's about it. There's a question. Explain your position on property taxes, especially for retired people.
Absolutely. I think property taxes is the same for everybody in the Constitution right now. And the Constitution does allow for property taxes to raise funds. But don't hang up on me yet, whoever asked that question. Because I think what we've got ourselves in the position of is taxing unrealized capital gains, which is not good. We should not be doing that. So every 4 to 5 years, we reassess property values and we assign a tax to that. Right. And even with this whole net neutral thing, it becomes a shell game of whether your taxes are going up or going down. And so you'll see a piece of legislation from me this year. It's ready to file now that fixes that value at really what you've paid for, not what an assessment is. I want to get that unrealized capital gain out of the equation. And secondly, in Tennessee, there should never be a citizen that is evicted by the government from their residence, their farm, where they live, because they're delinquent in taxes. I don't have, and I said that specifically, and that's the way I've asked this to be written, and we've argued about it some. I'm not a big fan of any foreign ownership of soil in Tennessee, period. Jay Reedy did really good things with adversarial. I appreciate his work there. But I'm not sure that a French or a British citizen should be allowed to own property in Tennessee. You should be a U.S. citizen only.
Agreed.
And so for folks that are non-citizens, if they fall behind on their taxes, we shouldn't show them any grace. But if you're a citizen, we shouldn't evict that person. And so and I'm going to try to change that this year. I'm going to give Bill Lee the opportunity. I'll give my colleagues the opportunity to vote for it, and Bill Lee the opportunity to sign that into law. He needs a win.
This is back to the real ID question, and I don't really like this.
Thank you all for coming tonight so much. I'm on a Zoom call right now. I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Oh, God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm on a Zoom call. I just want to say good night. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, Dave.
No problem. Okay. Hey, given that real ID will eventually become mandatory and then become the digital ID for the U.S., will you co-sponsor Representative Halsey's bill to ensure real ID will never become mandatory in Tennessee? So this is looking towards session and the fact that you're still in the State House. So are you going to co-sponsor Halsey's Real ID Act?
I co-sponsor lots of Halsey's bills. I'll read it first. I won't agree to co-sponsor anything until I read it. But yeah, I can't imagine that I wouldn't. But you won't get a hard yes from me till after I read it. And I haven't read it yet. I hadn't seen that bill yet. I think that we should be pushing to undo that in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I think that this whole real ID thing is horrible. And it was just a way to give more federal control over things. And they sent it down in the form of money and manipulated the Department of Safety and others into doing that. And I don't have a real ID. Don't have any. I've got a passport. If I have to fly, I'm not going to do the real ID. You know, it amazes me that we, across the United States, so many liberals and rhinos fought against increasing the requirements for identification for a foreigner to drive a truck,
right,
or even election ID.
Yeah.
But they'll just hook, line, and sinker take this whole real ID thing. And, you know, I think it was sold under false premise. I think we need to be working to undo it. I think the governor of the state of Tennessee ought to be putting much pressure on the Tennessee delegation to, by golly, go stand up for the folks of Tennessee. Most people don't like it. We need to undo it.
Absolutely. Now, I know this is basically a softball, but it's what somebody sent in. How does Monty feel about constitutional carry in Tennessee? Would he correct the current law?
Absolutely. Several things. I spent much of the day today. You'll see a couple bills from me this year. One specifically addressing primarily the whole intent to go armed and this travesty that's taken place in Tennessee. And it's been a travesty for a long time.
Right.
And, you know, many of us have tried to file bills to correct it. And, you know, leadership hadn't wanted to be part of that. The truth is they've got their own armed guards. They feel safe. They don't care about everybody else.
Yeah.
But the other bill is a really inclusive, really expansive, back to what our constitutional rights are. And I'm sure it won't be perfect because I had something to do with it, but it addresses campus carry. It addresses gun-free zones.
Right.
It addresses long guns. We need to correct this overly complex Tennessee gun law.
Right.
Has to be corrected. We all believe intent to go armed is unconstitutional. We all think that we are innocent until proven guilty. But under Tennessee gun law, that's just not the case.
Right.
And then we have people like our Department of Safety employees, and I don't know who wrote it, but they should probably send them back to school. They come before committee, Government Ops Committee last month, and they offered a rule that to teach a firearms carry class, the only firearm in the room could be one that was permanently disabled. Now let that sink in for a minute.
In a carry class.
Not only were they making a carry class a gun-free zone, but permanently disabled means that firearm at one point in time had to be abled. So it was a functioning firearm to be disabled, right? You can't disable something that doesn't work. It's already disabled.
Right.
And permanently means forever. So some attorney, I'm guessing, wrote that down. And I'm like, do you not understand the meaning of the words you're using? Or is your anti-gun bias in the Department of Safety so strong that you're blind to anything constitutional? And I think that's the case. I think there needs to be a recalibration in several state agencies. And I'll go ahead and say it. The Department of Safety is going to be recalibrated hard under Fritts.
Good.
We have done some things that we continue to infringe upon people's rights, and we lobby against rights in committee. And lots of good men and women wear the uniform of the Tennessee Highway Patrol, so it's not them.
Right.
But at a legislative liaison level, and it all goes back to Governor Lee.
Yep.
That's where the buck stops. But we've allowed that to get so out of control. Think about what's happened in the last couple years, Dave, with the Department of Safety. 2 years ago, they had an employee that was selling fake IDs to Guatemalans or some Flungians or something, and it took them. There were hundreds of them sold before they caught it, and then now we have this whole thing with a trooper thinking that they can drive 85 in a 55 in a construction zone, and the behavior on that videotape of that young man toward that Metro Nashville Police, that's unacceptable. I have spoken to lots of law enforcement, including people who either were or are Tennessee Highway Patrolmen, and they're like, that hurts all of us. Yeah. That video hurt every law enforcement person. And again, if the governor, I would offer the governor this advice, and I'm not in his seat, but if you have that kind of failure, I think you have to suspend the role of those people and what they're doing individually and maybe even collectively.
Well, now the speaker needs to be held to account on that as well. He was driving the speaker.
He was. I have all kinds of questions about that, but I'm just going to deal with the safety part of it first. I've led lots of people, and if you have that kind of failure, it's time to have a training day and pause on all that work before you understand everybody, and have an assurance that they're calibrated, that they too have to follow the law.
Right.
I realize there's some exceptions for traveling at a higher rate of speed under certain conditions, but there was no need in that. And then the behavior, unacceptable. Yes. And you look at almost half of the 419, what we're now calling sober arrests. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I've sent a letter. I won't exploit the whole letter here in the email in the interview, but I've asked safety some questions about that. I've asked them to do a field sobriety test on me this week. I've never had one performed on me. I want to see what that feels like to be on the receiving side of it. And I have also asked to participate in a wet lab, because we are training and pseudo-calibrating our law enforcement officers, if we're still doing wet labs, as to how well they're doing the work. When I talk to former highway patrolmen, when I talk to police chiefs, sheriff's deputies, leadership in Middle Tennessee and police departments, they say things like, the sobriety test we're doing kind of puts us at a fail and early on. So,
why is that? Why is that?
What a couple of the folks said to me was, we're trying to make eye doctors out of police officers, and it just doesn't work. And I will tell you what was encouraging to me, and I hate drunk drivers. And yes, I said that. I know we're supposed to hate people, but I hate folks that will get in their car and risk your life and drive, right? Because we almost lost a son and a daughter-in-law to a drunk driver some years back. And I don't have any compassion for them. But I also don't have any compassion if we have reached outside our legal boundary. If we're depriving people of their freedom to move about by arresting them, that 419 should aggravate a lot of people this year. Something's wrong. That's got to be corrected. We're doing something wrong. It's either a training issue, it's an expectation issue of, what are the expectations?
Right. Do we have a quota? Are we trying to fill a quota like with speed traps?
Or something. Yeah. It could be many things. Yeah. Or, in both cases, it's also leadership. Isn't it just a leadership failure? And I think we have to ask those hard questions. I know some people aren't going to like hearing that. I don't care. Right. It's the role is to not make a state employee feel badly when they make a mistake. It is correct that bad mistake so that they can contribute in a positive manner to the good people of Tennessee for a long career. That's what we should be objecting.
Yeah, make sure we actually have a Tennessee Highway Patrol and not Tennessee Highway Pirates. So
and I do think, and I grew up thinking the Highway Patrol back when decades ago, my grandfather was in law enforcement. They're the preeminent law enforcement agency, and it's like Tennessee Highway Patrol and the Texas Rangers were always high, and they still are.
Right.
But we got to correct that. Confidence in government is tremendously important. And if you don't address it and get it corrected, you'll lose confidence in government agencies, and that's not a good thing.
Absolutely. Here's another question. New Hampshire has passed a Defend the Guard bill. It's provisional on other states passing it. Can we get the Defend the Guard bill passed in Tennessee this session, in your opinion?
Don't know. Leadership's going to push against it hard. The military department is pushing against it hard, and I think from a wrong position. Some of those men I served with in Iraq and love them to death, but they're just wrong on the issue and the way they're looking at it. I volunteered to go to Iraq at age 40, and we have so abused for decades the whole war without a declaration.
Yep. Absolutely.
And you might be able to find a place where you defend or you prevent an attack or something like that, but 20 and 25 years, unacceptable.
Absolutely.
And we are seeing fulfilled what President Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex, because the key thing that these people are arguing is we won't get this equipment or we'll lose money.
Right.
I got to tell you, upholding the Constitution is much more valuable than any dollars that come into this state, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a co-sponsor on that. I think we've got a good person who's a co-sponsor on the version when Reedy had it. I think Michelle's going to do a good job. You can be sure that there's going to be overt and maybe hidden pressures on Michelle to do something else with that bill. I can guarantee you it's going to happen. It's protecting the status quo rather than doing what's right. We need to correct that. I hope we can get it passed. As governor, I'm going to push for it. I will tell you, I have a problem with the fact that we sent 700 Tennessee Guardsmen to the Middle East the same weekend that Helene hit.
Yep.
And doesn't really matter who the president is. Doesn't really matter if it, short, tall, fat, skinny, Republican, Democrat. At some point in time, we've got to be willing to say those people fall under the authority of the governor of the state of Tennessee, and we're not going to send them off to an undeclared war.
Yep.
We have a responsibility for them here, and we should be exercising. You and I've talked about this. The people in Memphis are thankful and grateful.
Right.
I think we should have acted a long time ago, but too many deployments. I signed up. So I'm all about, if we have to go do something, you raised your hand, you got to be a part of that. But most of these people that are making these decisions never served in the military.
Yep.
And they go and they stand at the goodbye and they think they've done something by shaking hands with a few of those poor little soldiers. Those soldiers and those mamas and daddies could care less about shaking a governor's hand when their son's going to Syria or Iraq or wherever.
Yep.
They're just thinking about that son. And so we're putting employers in bad position.
Yep.
I have worked, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on this. I promise I'll stop with this quickly. I was a guardsman. I have worked for good employers who were in support of the Guard and Reserve, and I've worked for horrible ones. I worked for people who tried to, they wanted to run me off because I was a guardsman. I have.
Wow.
Back when I was young and an hourly employee. And I've worked for some, BWXT was a great company as a guardsman. They were so good to me. But we don't help that paradigm any if we keep our troops deployed all the time.
Right.
And even if they follow the law to the letter of the law, Dave, that young man or that young woman that's up for a promotion may be looked over just because they're never there.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we've got to do something with that. I think it's time for the governor to start standing up. I think it's time to have a combat veteran, a National Guardsman as the governor of the state of Tennessee. I think I have a much better perspective. I think my wife understands what it's like to deploy a soldier. My sons understand that. I understand it. And I think that's something that these people can't grasp because they never have done it.
I want to hit on something. I do have another question, but it's a softball. I mean, I guess it's a softball for me. I don't know, but I will ask this question. But I want to say this. I talked about your background, and you've mentioned it here, but I think it's worth hitting again. All of the different areas of expertise and or experience that you've had. So I think you said at one time you were a carpenter. You were in the military. You started off as a security guard. Where was that? Y-12 or whatever?
Yeah, I was a security police officer for about 4 years at Y-12.
Yeah, and then eventually, I mean, you went to school, did what you had to do, and eventually you were an agency head?
Well, I was at Y-12. I was the director of enriched uranium operations at Y-12, EUO ops manager, casting, purification, metal production for uranium. Very complex, probably the most complex job I've ever done. It's far more complex than what I'm applying for now. I think this being governor is going to be harder, but I think managing enriched uranium operations in building 9212 is the most complex job I've ever had. Yeah. I was the director of operations for nuclear fuel. So we made the fuel for the United States Navy. We did down blending for TVA. I understand the uranium supply chain. I understand plutonium and tritium supply chains. And I understand that in a way that I'm going to be able to contribute part of the reason that I set up an energy policy my first year in the General Assembly was because I knew we needed to do that. We were perturbating between leftist and sometimes rhino approaches at energy production, primarily electricity and oil, gasoline in the United States. And we need to get that correct. Tennessee needs a seat at that table. And then, I restructured the State Energy Policy Council to put non-paid subject matter experts in a place to advise the Tennessee General Assembly and the governors in the future. And so I've got that. I was a correctional officer. I worked for the Tennessee Department of Correction back a long time. I started work when I was age 12 as a janitor in a fitness center. I couldn't afford to pay the dues unless I cleaned the showers and the equipment and the bathrooms and all that stuff. And it give me a chance to lift weights. I still think I'm a little bit of a carpenter. I probably couldn't lay 100 blocks today in one day if I tried. And I'd probably get the mud all mixed up. I'd put the wrong amount of sand in it and mess it up. But I'm a blue collar working class person who God has blessed to get to do things. When Trump 45 come in, I did manage a federal office. I had my job title was a physical scientist. I really don't know what that means. I don't think you can have this accent and be any kind of scientist, but I was a physical scientist. And I had the material recovery and recycle. I was a federal program manager for that under Trump 45. And I also set up the Office of Stockpile Production Integration for our nation's strategic deterrent. And I was acting office director for that for about 2 years. That's still in place. Every now and then I'll hear from somebody that I worked with in DC, and some of the things that we got to do. It's satisfying to know that you had somebody that understood material management, handling, the cost of doing business, radiological control, nuclear criticality safety. I understand those things. I did. I think I still do. I was an operations manager for a non-proliferation project where we went to Iraq and recovered the uranium there in 2007, 2008.
So I want to talk to the audience real quick. So guys, listen to this. Listen to his experiences, and then compare those to Marcia, and Mr. Rose, and whoever else gets in this election, into this race. I don't think you're going to find anybody else that's going to have that many different experiences and that depth of experience. And I mean, that's my opinion.
Can I also offer? I was actually a farmer, not just. We cut about 25 acres of hay, so tiny version of that, and raised a lot of sweet corn and green beans and tomatoes, and my kids used it to make a few dollars. And I enjoy putting something dead in the ground and watching it rise up. I'm not doing that now.
Yeah.
But I did that for a little while. I worked the loading docks on the ship channel in Houston for about a year and a half, 2 years.
Right.
Loading freight, unloading freight on a forklift, and sometimes by hand. So God has blessed me to get to wear some of the hats I've worn. I think it indicates that the good Lord has a sense of humor, and B, it indicates this, and I say this with no arrogance. I say this with all love and respect and thankfulness to Him. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can lay blocks. I can rebuild an old car. I haven't seen anything I can't do. And some things are much harder than others. Some things are more complex than others are. But I think not just me, all of us are created to be able to do great things. But I think you have to develop a competency in those fields, right, and often in diverse fields, to be good at that.
Yeah. Last
thing I'll say on that, I offer young people this advice all the time. Become a subject matter expert in something new every day. Now, that's an impossibility, but that approach enables you to be a continuous learner. Read a lot. Reading is important.
Yep.
And, so I try to practice those things.
Okay, school vouchers. I know where you're at, but let's hear it. And then I want to ask you a question about homeschool.
Okay, school vouchers were unconstitutional. I voted against them in committee, got pulled off education and put on government ops, which is a good thing. I like it much better. I voted against in the special session. I voted against them. Article 11, Section 12. They're unconstitutional. I'm convinced that. As governor, I plan to suspend those. That's going to make about 20,000, maybe 40,000 if leadership has the way and doubles it this year. I think they're fiscally irresponsible. I think, again, constitutionality is the first thing.
Right.
But I think they're fiscally irresponsible. I think rather than offering an incentive to a few hand-select recipients of a freedom scholarship, everybody's already free.
Right.
I think that we have to enforce a tougher standard on those failing schools. Those kids, my colleagues often point to Memphis or Nashville or whatever, and people in Memphis have told me their schools are not good. Incentivizing kids to go somewhere else still leaves a broken down school. If it's in Kingston, I don't think my schools are broke down, but it still leaves it there.
Yeah.
And it's not the bricks and the mortar that are broken. It is the curriculum, the ideology, and the lack of focus on what that student needs. And here's why I think that's happening. We have a bloated Department of Education that we're spending, I don't know yet how much, we're asking, on contracts for standardized testing. And we're spending time on standardized testing in copious amounts of time.
Right.
Based on what the teachers are telling me. Let's get back to a model where we instruct in a more classical form of education. We instruct and the teachers evaluate. Let's set a high standard in Nashville with a less bloated Tennessee Department of Education and set those high standards. And then let's hold accountable with the finances those local LEAs to make sure that they are getting better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the parents got to play a part in that, right? We do live in a time today where lots of parents, some parents anyways, want to just send their kid off in the school to make something out of it. It requires a parental engagement. God gave the little boy, the little girl to the mom and daddy. The mom and daddy have all the authority to make those decisions in my worldview, but they also have a great deal of the responsibility.
Yeah. Not to use it as a daycare.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I had a friend of mine who's she's retired. She went back to teach, and she was one of my signing parties where we're signing my, petition. And she said she teaches second grade, Nancy does, and she said she had a number of kids that couldn't tie their shoes.
Good Lord.
Yeah, that's a huge failure. I have lots of teachers tell me that they have kids that come in kindergarten, first grade that aren't potty trained. And that's not the responsibility of the public to do that. No. But it is also English as a second language.
That's another problem.
The responsibility of the public either.
Absolutely.
You can get.
We can hit that hit that in just a second, but I've got a couple questions here that I wanted to finish up. So, homeschool option, should it be protected?
Absolutely. Again, God gave the child to the parent, not the state of Tennessee. And these people, someone handed me a bill last year that wanted me to co-sponsor it. And that bill said the first couple sentences were that the homeschool parent had to present their curriculum to the LEA. I don't know what's wrong with that person that they think I would sponsor that bill. I will tell you, Dave, this whole thing, we've had a couple different issues. I won't pick on any one particular, but a parent is compelled by law to send their kid to school or their truancy problem.
Yep.
They're compelled to pay taxes to fund the school, and then they send the kid to school. In some cases, not all schools, some have corrected some of these, but we've had schools say, no, we're going to leave these gay theology books in the school.
Yeah.
And kids shouldn't be facing that stuff at school. And a teacher that talks to any kid about whether they are male or female or some other version ought to immediately be fired. I don't care what tenure is or was.
Yeah.
There is no room for that in school. That is not educational. It is atheistic and communistic at its core, and it is designed to ruin a generation of children, to teach them that there's something in between male and female.
Absolutely. Now, we're hearing that Lee wants to add 20,000 more vouchers this upcoming session. You think that can we stop that? Do you think we could stop that from being increased?
My colleagues that were strong-armed into voting for that, I hope that they have decided it ain't worth it. We weren't told the truth, and we're not voting for it, because across the state, it is not popular. And I'm hoping some of them are more concerned about getting reelected, and they'll vote that down, because it's still unconstitutional. Another 20,000, it's 20,000 more unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And its physical responsibility doubled. Irresponsibility doubled.
Right.
I hope that we can beat that this year. But let me touch on that quickly.
Yep.
This establishment in Nashville, and again, the buck stops on Governor Lee's desk because he holds that office. But this establishment has attempted to centralize everything from corrections to education.
Yep.
They want to add another 100. I'm told, I hadn't seen it yet. I hadn't seen the budget yet. But they want to add maybe another 100 troopers.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, and so all these things have cost. There is a mentality in the Nashville establishment that money grows on trees. They've forgotten the state tree is a tulip poplar, not a money tree. and we need to be thinking that way.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Well, this is a question from a
let me go back to the homeschool for just a minute, too.
Yeah.
That centralization lust that they have in the Nashville establishment, and it is a lust for power.
Right.
They want to control everything about the children. They want to control when they have vaccinations, what they can say, what they can write papers about, and whether or not, if they're going to do homeschooling, whether or not mom and daddy is reporting to the LEA about that. It's none of the LEA's business. Yeah. And so this will sound extreme for some of your listeners, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is what I believe. I promised that I would be straightforward about everything. I think truancy laws are crazy unconstitutional.
I agree.
That the state can say to a parent, if you don't send your kid to school, we're going to take your child away from you. That is wrong. If we are free to choose education excellence, which I think we already are, we are also, as parents, free to choose not excellence. And there's a consequence for that.
Right.
But it is not up for government to force that parent to do that. And the whole thing of trying to get into the homeschools is just that. They want
that control.
They want to control. It's a centralization of control. Yes.
Absolutely. Now, if you are elected governor, do you see any way you could possibly use the National Guard to deal with the issue of the bioengineering of the skies over Tennessee?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I've thought on that a lot. I think our best approach is to continue to garner support for making it illegal in the states, and to put heavy pressure on the federal government, whomever is in there. I think RFK sympathetic to my view on this, the geoengineering in all forms.
Right.
I also think that our Attorney General should be seeking out perhaps damages that may have been caused by just the whole the weather engineering of cloud seeding, because if indeed these companies in the western U.S. are harvesting more rain than they would have otherwise, and they say they are, that's why they're making so much money doing it, then how much has Tennessee been hurt by their harvesting additional rain? If we had, only because Arkansas is the Razorback state, I don't think they do geoengineering in the state of Arkansas, but if the Razorback state were sending hogs across the I-40 bridge into Memphis, and they were leaking some kind of biotoxic, nasty, smelly stuff on the roads, wouldn't we reach out to them and say, you need to change how you're hauling those hogs so that we're not polluting the streets in Tennessee? Yes, we would.
Right.
Or wouldn't we do the same thing on the geoengineering? And so I think that's one of the first attacks that we ought to be making is make it interpose on behalf of the citizens of Tennessee that this is not okay. Now, I'm one of those people that think the military is part of the geoengineering. You know, we sent Hegseth a letter asking him to stop that. And I hadn't gotten a reply yet. I sent him. And Mastriano, who's a candidate for governor up in Pennsylvania, did the same thing. There's a group of this year's crop of what I would call more liberty-minded governors. Doc Chambers in Texas, Mastriano in Pennsylvania, maybe the guy in Colorado. I think they're willing to start standing up. The guy in Michigan, there's actually, I think, a constitutionalist trying to run in Michigan. Will that not be a change?
Boy, they need one there for sure.
Yeah, Gretchen's worse than Lee.
Yeah. Common Core. We don't have it in name, so that we don't actually have it in name anymore, but we still have Common Core in our schools. Is that something that you would, that we could expect you to get rid of?
Yes, sir. I want to, through appointments and through management of the Department of Education, I do want to get us back to a more classical learning model in Tennessee. I think that's important. And I know that, Lee promised that, didn't do it. Larry Arnn said some things, hurt some feelings, insensitive things he probably shouldn't have said. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on those statements. I think that there is great room for improvement in Tennessee about getting away from what has become a modern approach to education and go back to something that is more classical. I think, Dave, that we stopped many, not all, many LEAs and states have stopped reading things like Beowulf or Shakespeare because they tell us that there is a foundational truth and the struggle of man endures. We want to read contemporary things that have hens and roosters confused and assume that we can change what the reality of nature is. And that's part of this whole movement of postmodernity that everybody has their individual truth. Well, that's not true. That's not the case. There is a foundational truth.
Right.
And we need to get back to that. And I think the education system you and I grew up under and the ones before us was more in that line. Absolutely. That doesn't mean that we don't take advanced physics and chemistry and things that we've learned. We have new elements in the periodic table that we didn't have when you and I were a boy. But there is still the base, this is correct and this is not. And I think we've lost some of that. And I think there's a thirst in our public school teachers to get back to something. I think that our public school teachers feel betrayed. They feel betrayed by a governor who said that he was supportive of making education better, and he didn't listen to them. Yep. And it doesn't mean we have to agree on everything, but we have lots of good public school teachers, private school teachers, and homeschoolers. And we should not forget those. The Department of Education and the state school board ought to have members of all three advising them.
Right.
Because and that's not to get the hooks into the homeschool or the private school, but it's because homeschoolers do some things better than private schools do, and they do some things better than public schools, and public schools do some things better than either one of them. And so let's get them all in the same rooms and teams and boards together to make sure that we're optimizing the opportunity to recognize the inherent value of education in the great state of Tennessee.
Okay. Well, hey, Monty, I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been a long day for you. You got a longer one tomorrow. Any closing thoughts?
I thank God for this opportunity. I've told you, I think I've been called to do this, right? And I pray, I'm certain I've been called to run for this. And everybody gets to practice the liberty of how they vote. And I'm good with that. What a beautiful experience to get to meet people in Dyersburg and in Chattanooga, to get to meet people in Johnson City. And, we went, Denise and I went to a woman's self-defense class, situational awareness class, a couple weeks ago up in Sullivan County. And this whole journey, I'm going to meet so many wonderful people. I've told you this, and I serve with what I think there's some really good people in the General Assembly and really good people in the Cordell Hall building that aren't elected people. They're good public servants that work each day to try to do the right thing for constituents. And they're pleasant to be around. Some of these politicians, I'm not crazy about being around them. The ones that think they're better than other people, what I would call the box seat politicians, the $1,000 a plate,
right,
out of touch with it. I'm not crazy about being around them. They kind of sicken me. But man, I've met people who have lots and they're great folks and they love America and they love liberty. And I've met folks that are barely getting by. And just a lady named Gladys in Orange Mound. I've stopped at her house twice. I went down to door knock. First time I was in Memphis door knocking in Orange Mound. And I went back right before Thanksgiving just to say hi. Because to talk to this dear little 85-year-old lady with my buddy Anthony Blackman, who I've become friends with down there, it will just lift your spirit. She doesn't have a whole lot, but you feel better about being one of God's creatures after you talk to her. And I'm thankful for that. So I look forward to winning. I'm sure it's going to be culture shock in Nashville after we win in November and we're inaugurated. But I think Tennessee wants a little culture shock. They're ready for somebody to break glass in this case of emergency, and they're ready for liberty and less government. So we got to win August 6th. That'll be here before you know it.
Yep.
And I think on August 6th, I'd just ask you viewers, vote liberty and less government, and vote Fritts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you for being with us, and thanks for being in the race and giving the people of Tennessee a real choice. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Thanks again to David Baldwin for his generous donation and support. We really appreciate it. Check out our audio podcasts on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at the website TennesseeInformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Come and meet the true constitutional conservative, the guy you just saw here. Candidate for governor, Monty Fritts. If you're a Christian, a conservative, and support the U.S. and Tennessee Constitution, you should really hear him speak on his values and plan for Tennessee. January 19th, 2026, that's a week from today, from 1 to 3:15 at the New Moon Restaurant, 711 Park Avenue, Lebanon, Tennessee. The capacity is 70 people, so it'll be a small group, and you can ask Monty questions that you have. There is also a Monty meet and greet in the Mount Juliet Del Webb community at 4 p.m. This event will require an RSVP from the host to ensure there is space available. Contact Rick Julian, 630-730-2009 if you cannot attend the 1 p.m. event and prefer the 4 p.m. in Mount Juliet. And also in Jackson County, the Jackson County GOP, Monty will be there Tuesday, January 27th, 6 p.m. at the New Hope Baptist Church. That's 311 North Murray Street in Gainesboro, Tennessee. That's Tuesday, January 27th, 6 p.m. Okay. We have a special Thursday edition this week featuring Andrea Gomez and Kathy Harms from Tennessee Fair Elections to discuss upcoming election legislation. Hope you'll join us. Our guests next week will be Karen Bracken and Twyla Brace, here to talk about the Real ID legislation coming up in the Tennessee legislature and what you need to know about it. These are two very well-informed ladies that work very hard to get important information out about the things our government is doing. Hope you'll join us. For our second hour next week, we'll be joined by author Frederico Lyons to talk about his new book, The Road to Liberty, bringing an end to the 16th and 17th unprincipled amendments. Sounds good to me. This should be interesting. I think we can all agree the 16th has been a disaster. Also, here's a couple of quick mentions of programming on the My Paris TV network, where we simulcast at the Tennessee Informer. So tomorrow, Tuesday, the 13th at 7 p.m. on the Mike Weatherford Show, Mike is joined by Night in Hell Game Call founder Harold Knight and special co-host Brenda Valentine, the First Lady of Hunting. They will be talking about how they both started out, and both were from very humble beginnings, and they became huge influencers in the hunting industry, even creating a successful game call business. You don't want to miss that. And then Sunday, January 18th, on the Sportcast with Jeremy Buckalow, Jeremy is joined by Will Jelks and Josh Greer, breaking down the national championship matchup between Miami and Indiana. Should be a great show full of information for the college football fans. Find them and their links at westtn.tv.com or myparistv.com, bringing you West Tennessee local programming. Again, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of the month. I think we can do it if you just pitch in, please. Share us with your friends. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.